and welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and this is the platform I've chosen to talk about living a life that's in alignment with your hopes, your dreams, and your goals, and your circumstances. And sometimes your circumstances are not exactly what you hope for, but you would not go back and change it for any other reason. And that is really what I'm talking about with my guest today, Lisa E. Jones, who is a mom to 3 teenagers and also is the mom to a child that has bipolar disorder as well as ADHD. She also has a partner that has bipolar disorder, and she shares her story, how she's now advocating for those that are struggling and dealing with different mental illnesses, and also difficulty adjusting, as well as those who love them. This is her son, this is her partner, both of whom she loves dearly, and she wants to help change the perspective and the knowledge for all the rest of us that are not necessarily in that position. So I welcome you to this episode. So I am super excited today to speak with someone who really is moving into the mental health and making it feel much more like what it is. That, you know, we get an ankle sprain. Sometimes we have some emotional things going on. Sometimes we're born with it. Sometimes we have traumas, and there should not be a stigma with it. And I am really excited to speak with Lisa Jones, who is making some strides with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I get to read about you ahead of time. I know that you were describing some of your story, but then again, you know, what you talk to someone about and what you're wanting to share on a podcast is always a little different. So why don't you share a little bit like how your journey began, please?
Sure. First off, I grew up in a family where I had a sister who we didn't know what her diagnosis was. So, and back in those days, you know, therapy and having a mental illness was kind of frowned upon and stigmatized, and keep her in the house, keep her quiet kind of thing. So she never really got properly diagnosed. Her life has never been perfect because of that. The reason I really got into it was when my son was born. Something was always off with him, I would say. From when he was young, he was slow to pick up on things. Always kind of moving around a lot, couldn't really focus on things. When he went to school, he couldn't, you know, he was the kid who walked around the classroom. He was the kid who didn't pick up what the teacher taught. He was the kid who walked around the room. He was the kid who, you know, went around the room and maybe hit a kid, or, you know, picked a fight with somebody, or, you know, spent the day in the nurse's office because he didn't want to be in the classroom, things like that. So as he kind of got older than that, like middle school, that's when it really, well, let me go to backtrack. In elementary school, it got to the point where, you know, school was so difficult for him that I took him to a neurologist and see what was going on there. And that's when he was diagnosed ADHD. Not as much hyperactive, just more of the attention problem. He was also diagnosed with something with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, because he was very well defiant. He didn't do what he was asked to do. He was went into, you know, had a lot of anger. And so he got that diagnosis as well. So that was in 2nd grade. And he had medication for it, which I deliberated upon because I really didn't want to give my son medication. He's 2nd grade. Ultimately, I did. And he thanked me in the 2nd grade. And one of the first experiences I have with medication and the effect of it and how it helps people is when he was in 2nd grade and he was eating waffles, and he made himself a waffle. He put on it like blueberries, and he put a smiling face with the blueberries. And he showed it to me, and he goes, "Mommy, it's the first time I've ever felt happy." And this is a 2nd grader. So I said, "Oh my God, you know, I did the right thing, you know, giving this kid medication." But, you know, things were okay for a while. And then middle school, his problems, you know, kind of got worse. School was harder. You know, he had a lot of ups and downs, anger, a lot of anger. And when he was 13, He someone in school said that he was threatening suicide. And so I rushed to the school, and he was admitted into the hospital for threatening suicide. And there was some other, I'm going to say, modified attempts in the house where he put his head under the water in the bathtub and had to pull his head out and things like that. So with that whole experience and that year being about 13, he was diagnosed with a mood disorder. Doctor wasn't really too keen on giving him the bipolar diagnosis, but ultimately he did receive a bipolar diagnosis, bipolar 2 diagnosis. So, and that began that whole treatment for ADHD and bipolar disorder as well into high school. Had a long journey with schools and schools not understanding that a child with ADHD and bipolar disorder has a problem learning. He is not learning disabled, but his diagnoses prevent him from really working at his best, I will say. My worst experience in middle school, they wouldn't even give him one, even though he had the suicidal incident in school. They wouldn't even let him have a 504 plan. They said he was lazy and that he didn't need any help. So I fought for 3 years. He never had any assistance in the classroom. High school, I went in kind of more vigilant, and I said, my son needs help. He needs additional help in the classroom. And the principal said to me, and this is a quote, he said to me, your son is just lazy. Your son won't even graduate. You might as well pull him out now. I had to take it all the way up to the superintendent. I then had a psychologist, the district psychologist, come into the classroom to discuss all the 504 planning. He wasn't even an IOP. I just wanted IEP. I wanted a 504 plan, which is just modifying test time, the ability to maybe, be late for more assignments because it takes him longer, things like that. So I had a psychologist, the district psychologist came into the 504 meeting and said to them, do you know how bipolar disorder affects learning and affects a person in this type of environment? And they turned to him and said, we do not know how it affects it. And he went and explained to them. And these are educators and higher administrators did not know what bipolar disorder does or mood disorder does, how it affects people. And how it affects learning. It took him to do that for them to say, we will give him a plan so he has extra time for tests, etc. So that was kind of his high school beginning. His high school was difficult. And, learning wise, keeping up wise, it was kind of hard for him. He did graduate high school and with assistance. And but he did. He's in trade school right now. He did drop out of college, but he intends on going back. So it was a very long, just to sum it all up, it was a long journey. It was a long journey with him. I saw how he was treated. I had someone, when he was first diagnosed in the school, an assistant principal tell me to get your son away from me. My son, by the way, is not violent with outside the world. He's not, outside he's kind of meek, and he was a child. And he said, get him away from me. I'm afraid he'll hurt me. I said, if he's suicidal, he's not homicidal. So they don't even understand bipolar disorder. It's stigmatized. The way people talk about it is awful. And with this, when he first got diagnosed, I said, this is horrible, how he is being treated, how there's no services, how it's hard to find a therapist, how, just awful. There's no support groups for families. I mean, it was awful. So I reached out to not-for-profits in my area and joined my first board on a not-for-profit and mental health not-for-profit for persistent mental illness. And I was on that for a few years. They were acquired by a bigger organization, and I've been on their board for a few years now. So I've met with politicians, influencers. I have a blog. I talk on podcasts. I speak to whoever wants to hear about a story like that. And the story continued. I have a significant other who I didn't know what he was when I met him, what diagnosis he had. He ended up having bipolar disorder as well, bipolar disorder 1. So I had to learn how that disorder, because 1 is different than 2. And that has been interesting and an ordeal. He's been hospitalized, with mania and violence and things like that. He's now doing great, medicated correctly. His biggest thing is depression, and be able to work in that kind of position when you're that depressed. But I've learned a lot from both of them, and they both live in the same house with me. And it's a journey. It's a journey. And we're to the place now where they both understand each other, and they both feel bad for the other one because they know what it feels like. My significant other just started a job, and he wasn't working for a few months. He was very severely depressed. And my son said to me, pulled me aside, and he said, it's going to be very hard for him to work, because we work, we don't work, we work, we don't work. And it's real hard to get going when you've been at it for a while. It's very hard on us. And he tries to explain to me the way he feels. They try to explain how the other one feels. And it's kind of interesting because, I kind of get the the inside story from both of them, but I also do a load of reading, and I try to keep them on task and keep them, make sure they take the medication. That is a rule of my house. To live in this house, my son is now 19. You must be med compliant. That's a rule that is, you cannot be not med compliant. And that means consistent. That doesn't mean you take them, you don't. You must take your medication as indicated, unless we speak to the doctor and he changes you, or we talk about it, or whatever. But you have to take your medication. There can be no violence in my house. So there were those little kind of like hard and fast rules after some incidents that happened. And so far, so good.
And so far as a mom, I'd love to go back to elementary school, because I'm in my early 40s, and I know that I haven't even started talking about things in different school plans. It was just like some kid went to some other area, and you was really still called the gifted program. And I don't think we even use that terminology anymore, because then it makes it like you're not gifted. But I was in all of those gifted things. And so I just knew some kids were pulled out, but I had no idea of other people's learning style, other people. My journey through mental awareness came as I got older. And with your son, for example, with anger, was that, or is that, and again, I'm speaking from a place of not knowing, is that part of bipolar and mood disorder, this anger that you're just not sure, like angry from what?
Yeah, they have rage. Rage goes with the mania, with bipolar 1, and it also is a part of bipolar 2 disorder. So they go through periods of rage. Sometimes it's even mixed, where they'll be depressed and rage. It is definitely a part of bipolar disorder, anger. And my son is on medication now for the first time in his life for the past year, where he hasn't been going into rages. So he spent most of his life going with rages because he couldn't process, a situation. He struggled with processing how to his executive functioning, I would say, wasn't always spot on. And he'll still, even in his age now, he'll come to me and he'll make me talk through something. But he's also learned, and a lot of times he still says it to himself, like, what would my mother do in this? Because his executive functioning, maybe in that situation, is not as strong. And he has to basically learn what maybe other people know inherently. That goes to my significant other as well. I teach them things that I just never had to learn. I was also in gifted programs. So to have a son who struggled so much was very difficult. I mourned him for years. I mourned the son I was never going to have. But by the same token, the son that he became gave me a gift. He gave me the ability to reach out, to change things, to be able to speak to people about it. He gave me this gift, and who he is. And maybe he's not college bound. I always wanted my son to go to college. He dropped out, goes to a trade school, is different than I wanted and different than I expected and different than I was. but he has overcome way more than other kids. And I'm very proud of where he is, because he could very well have completed a suicide and didn't. So,
and from what it sounds like with your story is that there's the isolation as you as a mom, and him as to go to school is already traumatizing, whether you have anything going on or not. We have a lot of things there, and to be isolated at school and then have your mom not still trying to figure out and how to best work with you. It must have been very isolating for him.
Absolutely. Because he was having a hard time in school. I used to read for the first till 5th grade. I retaught him all his lessons. He learned, he's a tactile learner. He doesn't learn by being taught and spoken at. So I would come home if he was learning about roots, I remember. So I went and bought carrots. This is a root, and he had to touch it. He has to feel it. That's why trade school is working better for him. He has to have his hands on it. He's getting better with kind of reasoning, but that's hard for him. He doesn't trust his own judgment. Because his own head, and this is his words even, his own head is always in a race. His thoughts are all over the place. It's cluttered, and he doesn't trust his own judgment. So he'll reach to me and say, I need to do something. Can you help me? And helping him means thinking it out with him, teaching him logic. I teach my significant other who's older. I've taught him what it means, and my son too, what it means to work. They don't understand. And people with bipolar disorder have a very difficult time holding a job. That's also part of the whole disease of it. So I try to teach them, what does it mean to have a job? They both go gung-ho, full force into working. They burn out very quickly. And I try to teach them pacing yourself. Don't give 150%, give 80%. Or I always say give 5% more than the highest performer in the room. Why are you giving 150 when everyone else is giving 60? Then give 65. Things like that. So they kind of, they work. It's a better cadence for them, but they don't know this naturally. And I have to kind of tell them all the time. And they'll ask me questions. I have this going on. Even my significant other, he's working, and I call him or I'll text him and he won't answer for 4 hours. Like, I had to tell you something important. Why don't you answer me? Well, you're not supposed to be on your phone. I said, you can answer someone's text. They're not going to fire you if you don't answer my text. Okay. I said, you have to learn balance. They don't have that naturally. My son as well. And so it's like teaching, that's okay. If you have, there's a balance. Not everything is 100% work. Not everything is 100% play. There's a middle. And bipolar, of course, is the polarity. They're very extreme. And to teach the middle is kind of what I do with them.
Yeah.
And, I'm kind of proud that, they were able to hold jobs. I'm not going to say consistently. It depends on what's going on. But both are working, and both are med compliant. And I'm not going to say it's easy every day, because it's not easy every day. Medications affect people. There are side effects of medications that are hard to deal with. If my son takes half of his Adderall, like he's trying to cut back on it, he goes into withdrawal, and things like that happen. I mean, where it's hard to watch when they have to get their meds adjusted. It's hard to watch. When they say that, my whole life I need this. If I don't take this, I can't be in society. If I'm manic, if I'm filled with rage, I can't be in this society. I can't function. So they are relying on that as well, which is hard. Yeah, it's really hard. And there's a stigma on that as well. Can't walk around telling people that. I mean, I walk around trying to tell people, but I can't walk around telling everybody about it. They look down upon it. Everybody was telling me when they were graduating high school, my son's doing here, my son's doing this. My son barely graduated. And that's the truth. And he graduated, honestly, because my daughter, who is 3 years younger than him and myself, did his term papers, because he was so stressed. because it was COVID and there was a lot of stuff going on with my house and issues in the house with, we had a house fire, et cetera. And he couldn't handle all the pressure. That he just couldn't function. And we said, we have to get him out of high school. And the only way to do this is we're going to do his work. And for a month or two, we did it to keep him going. There was no other way. And
a lot of parents did. A lot of parents did, but we had no choice. We really, honestly, he would not have gotten out. Yeah. He was not doing one thing. And a lot of kids struggled with that too. He's not good at online work. He struggles with that. He needs to be hands-on, face-to-face. So even in the trade school, he was doing bad in the beginning because they weren't in the classroom. He needs to be in the classroom. He needs somebody to talk to him. He needs touching things. So yeah. So I'm not going to say it's been easy. I'm not going to say it's easy now. I'm going to say some days are great. Today's a great day. Some days are not so great. Yeah. When, bipolar, people with, bipolar disorder, and ADHD, I'm going to say my son loses his wallet every week. Today, we went on a search in the house for the wallet. We do it every week. He loses everything. He's on medication. It's the way it is. There's just some things are the way they are. And we adapt. Myself and my daughters, we know what's going to happen. We know we see something, we know it might be a trigger. Certain things are triggers, and we try not to trigger either of them. We don't want them triggered. Yeah. Not that we walk on eggshells, but we don't want to have episodes. Right. And so it's not an easy life, but it's actually by the same token, I'm going to do the flip side of it. People with, and I can only speak for bipolar disorder, are very creative. Extremely creative. My son is a drummer. He's an excellent drummer. He's a percussionist. My significant other did stand-up comedy. He writes. They're very, very creative. And I wouldn't want that piece of them not to be there. To not be there. Yeah. So. And to point, because I do have a very dear friend where her significant other also has mental illness and the work issues are difficult. And I've learned more from my dear friend. One thing she did say is that she's like, you're supportive of your significant other. And so that gives hope to people who are having struggles, that there is someone out there with patience and learning. But her big thing was that you also cannot lose your own identity in someone else. No. Do you feel that was somewhere a struggle for you, or have you always been able to still keep Lisa together as Lisa and be in different roles for other people?
Yeah, I'm able to do that, but also because of my son, I had to do that. Where my big thing I always tell people is I say bipolar is not, you can't catch it. Just because I'm taking care of you, or I'm helping you, or I'm guiding you, doesn't mean I catch it. I'm still me. I'm 5 feet away from it, and I'm there as a helper. It's not going to impact me. The way it does impact me is I hate to see them in that way. That's where it really bothers me. And the other way it bothers me is that I miss them during that time when they're in a major depression and laying in bed for 2-3 weeks. I miss that person. So it's an emotional thing too, because I miss who they really are. Underneath the disease, there is a person under there that has, that's great. And I miss that. But I don't get lost in it. And that's really what I keep, I tell people, you can't catch it. So there's you're there to help. You have to definitely have kind of boundaries. Like, I'll say sometimes you're in bed, but I'll say you have to get up. You have to eat. I'm also very strict with both of them. Another thing is sleeping. Sleeping, bipolar disorder, they think might even be a sleep disorder. They don't know what it is. They think it could be sleep. They think it can be a seizure disorder. They don't even know what it is. So sleeping is critical. If they don't sleep enough or they sleep too much, it triggers episodes. So my son and my significant other, I watch their sleep. I make sure they take their meds at the right time for sleep. Not that they don't, but they kind of always need to hear me say it. Did you take your meds? And I feel like maybe if I don't say it, they might say, oh, I'm cured. I don't know, but I feel like they have to hear me say it. Maybe it's a care thing, but I kind of always give a little reminder, but they both take them. But sleep is critical. It is really critical. So I make sure that, if I see my son is out too much and he's 19, he's out with his friends, I'll say, you need to sleep. You need to come home. You need to whatever, you need to rest, because if you don't, you're going to not be able to function. And that goes for anybody, but especially for somebody who has a trouble keeping it together and functioning in the first place. Sleep is very critical. Yeah. With my significant other, if he doesn't sleep, he hasn't been manic in almost a year, he would go into a mania phase if he didn't sleep. And that's what no sleep triggers. My son, if he when sleeping too much is depression. So I'm kind of where I'm a stickler is I monitor the sleep. Now that they're both working, I make sure that, okay, you're working, you still have to get that sleep in. I tell them maybe you need a nap. And as much as I'm not a nap person, as much as I don't need that, I have to know they do. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing that they need to know that. And that is the care. And people have told me, and I'm sure they've told your friend, why do you deal with this? You already dealt with your son. Why do you want to put up with this? Why do you care? Because I love who that person is. It's not a burden to me. It's annoying at times. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when someone's laying in bed for 3 weeks and they don't want to eat, it's frustrating. And we want to hold a conversation with them and they can't even muster the strength to do that. That's frustrating. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie. But the last time, this is only a few weeks back, I was adamant the medication needed to change. This, and I kind of push. I do same with my son to make the changes. And it's hard because a person in the middle of the throes of this, they're not aware completely of what's going on themselves. And the second thing is that they don't want to admit it. It's hard to admit. I can't function. I can't get out of bed. I can't be a part of my family. I can't help put the garbage out, feed the dog. I can't do anything. I can't function. That's a hard thing to admit to yourself and to anybody around you. So it's a hard thing to get through that they need additional help. That's probably the hardest thing and my big thing, another thing I'm always preaching around is you have to own the disease. As ugly as it is, as stigmatized as it is, they have to own that. They have to own what it is, what they have, what their symptoms are, and what their needs are. They have to own it. My son's actually in a better place than my significant other with that because I raised him to do that. Mm-hmm. Say what's wrong, ask for what you need, and let's get it done.
Yeah.
Where significant other was treated differently, different time, where it was very stigmatized. And you don't say anything. And his family kind of kept him in a room in the attic where it was like, don't show anybody when you're in that episode. We can't show people that, so he was raised like that with shame with it. And I'm trying to teach him, and he sees it, my son, it's no shame. It's no shame. You have a disease. It's in your brain. It's just not, you can't see it, but it's there. Mm-hmm. Don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Ask for help. There are people out there that care. You have to find them. And, but they are out there.
You mentioned you write a blog as well. How would someone be able to read what your words?
It's mindingmentalillness.com.
Okay.
So, and it's, I kind of talk about different symptoms and, I have some podcast stuff on there as well, but yeah, definitely take a read on there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm not going to lie to anybody. It's a lot living with folks with this, but it's been so rewarding, especially when I see where they are today. I mean, it's just, it makes me really proud, and of myself too. I mean, just because I've endured it, and I've watched them grow, even though I get very frustrated too. I mean, it's frustrating. It is frustrating. I know, because remember their first thing is, And the CEO of the agency I'm on the board for, he always says, mental illness is a very selfish disease. And that's not even meant in a bad way. When you have any disease, it's a selfish disease. When you have only a limited amount of resources, a limited number of straws, you're going to give them to yourself first.
Yeah.
And they do. So if all he's got enough energy to muster is to eat a bowl of soup, there's no energy for me telling him about my day. So, and that's where it's hard for a partner.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
And that's good to know for someone else, to hear from a partner standpoint, hear from a child as a parent standpoint, to know that it still is rewarding. It just looks differently than what you imagined. Because we can all imagine something, but to hear, yes, this is still a beautiful life. And I've learned this and I'm helping here. And I'm also opening up so people don't feel ashamed of their life, ashamed of their past, ashamed.
Right.
I don't feel shame if I have an ankle fracture. I should not feel ashamed of what's going on in here. It's not this choice that I made. And we all have our story to tell.
Yeah, no, there is no shame. And I've had friends say some pretty terrible things. Why do you put up with that? Why do you put up with him? Why do you? And, don't you want somebody who can work consistently? And I said, you know what? I said, I'm lucky that I've worked so many years and I don't need that. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for who he is as a person. I said, and I think that what you're telling me is very judgmental because you're judging what he is. And, you can't judge what you don't know and you don't understand. And I just chalk it up to the fact that people, they're afraid of it. And what you're afraid of, you don't want to be near.
Yeah.
For some reason, because of my son or whatever, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to sit down. I'm not afraid to ask to talk. I'm not afraid to get them the help. I don't like going into the hospital when they're in the hospital. It's hard, but I'm not afraid because I know it's a cycle and I know that there's ways to help them. And I know a lot of the coping mechanisms and I know a lot of the words to say. And so I'm just not afraid. And I'm more afraid to.
Yeah.
No, I'm more afraid to lose them.
And that's important for people to hear. There doesn't need to be any fear. It's really just that you see a person for who they are and to love that person. And that person can feel something, whether it's our child, significant other, friend, to feel safe with you, because a lot of us don't feel safe when we don't have mental illnesses, right? We're not safe with people, and to build that space for someone to come be with you, that is something beautiful, something good, and you're changing their life as well. And the neighbor that sees you, the person listening to the podcast, the person on your director board, it's making these differences.
Yeah, definitely. And it affects you. I get something from it. I'm not going to lie. I get to talk to people about it. I get to be, I don't live in the shame of it. I'm not telling everybody because some people aren't ready to hear it and some people are not open to it and some people are judgmental. But when I can talk about it, I sure do. And I have no shame. And I have no shame being with my son. I have no shame being with him. No shame whatsoever. I don't look at it as, and I always tell my son, my son is out there dating and stuff. And I tell him, you don't settle for less than what you deserve. You don't, even though you come to the table, you have to be transparent and say, I have a mental, illness. You still deserve what you deserve as a person, because you're a good person and you're fun and you're caring and you're creative and all this other stuff. And I'm telling him that. And I mean it. Because a lot of people that have a mental illness sell themselves short. They don't think they deserve anything. They have no ego. They have no confidence. People abandon them all the time.
All the time, yeah.
My son's father, basically our marriage broke up because he couldn't deal with him and didn't want to deal with him. So I chose my son over that. And so people they're accustomed to abandonment. And I, plenty of times. I always tell both of them, different times. I'll say there's plenty of times where I want to lock the door and change the locks on you. But, you are a pain in the neck. But, but I don't. And I won't. And I wouldn't. Because I get something out of it too. And I've seen them grow, and they're both so grateful to have that love and to know that I love today and I love it tomorrow as well. And it makes them flourish. It really does.
And that's so important for them and for you and for other people. I have learned a lot from you today in our time. And I am so excited to share this because it is something important to me. I'm a physical therapist, the more I work with people physically, the more I realize there's stuff emotionally, mentally, other things going on that we carry. And sometimes it's the story, I was shamed. So I'm so glad that you have the courage, and you don't need to tell everybody, but the people you tell makes a difference. And so thank you for your time. This was just a very powerful discussion that I had with Lisa. And I loved what she said towards the end of our time together, that she really wanted that her son and her partner know that they are loved. And at the end of the day, isn't that what all of us really want? To know that someone loves us, that someone cares about us, that someone finds us important in spite of our financial situation, in spite of our medical condition, in spite of our family history, in spite of our color, in spite of our gender. There are so many nuggets of wisdom that she has in her presentation today. And I'm so thankful that you took the time to listen, because time is something we don't get back. And if you felt this was a powerful podcast, I encourage you to share it, subscribe, because it does so much to put this podcast in the hands and ears of those that need it most. And until next time, let's keep building one another up.